Hey, what's going on, everyone? It is David Palmer, Leo King, and Dylan, the human design maven, 4 before dawn, here on this episode of July the 20. Well, I guess we're going here into the 28th now of 2022. How you doing?
Doing well. Happy Leo season. Happy new moon.
Yeah. But you got a lot coming up here. You got the program to talk about.
Ooh, yeah. DNA Alignment Academy is coming up August 13th. So this is my 12-week human design immersion, basically. And we break down every single aspect of the system and walk you through it in a way that's actually showing you these deeper patterns inside human design so that you don't have to memorize as much. If you know the basic patterns, you can go anywhere in the system. So it's going to be fun. This is the third time I've run this program, and it is going to align your DNA while you participate as well. So
how do people find it?
Find me on Instagram, Human Design Maven. There's buttons in the link in my bio. Any place you can find me, there's stuff about it, basically.
Human Design Maven on Instagram. Yeah, and then Coyote Star and I, we're doing a live stream this Friday on the 29th of July. Just go to highvibe.tv, click on Hell to Heaven. And it's a really cool page that we built to access the live stream. You can watch it on High Vibe on the apps, of course, or on our TV apps if you have Apple TV or Roku, or you can do it on the website. And when you just click Hell to Heaven, we've got a whole page describing all that we're going to be covering, really going into this North Node Uranus transit, the eclipse season, and Pluto leaving Capricorn, and so much about how this last part of 2022 really is not just some sort of last part. It really is it's a completely almost going to feel like a different year within a year. Definitely going to be a very powerful presentation, and you can check it out at highvibe.tv. Real cool page that was made that you can go to and just click on Hell to Heaven. We have a big show tonight, of course. So yeah, I'm showing people the page here. Yeah, that's Hell to Heaven. Definitely really cool. And
ooh, nice.
Yeah, definitely. I had some fun.
I like that.
Alex did a great job
skeleton.
making the flyer, and I took her flyer and I went, oh, okay, let's do that. Covering some of this stuff.
The flaming skeleton with the giant halo. Love
Scorpio eclipse season. Actually, Dylan and I are talking about doing an awesome, special video about that eclipse season, mixing the human design, the astrology, and some of the crazy stuff that we always talk about on our episodes, and mixing it all together. So we'll be announcing that probably in the next week or so. But, we got a lot to talk about on today's episode. Definitely a collective disclosure is one of the titles. And I think we can lead into the other subjects, which, of course, everything from circle worlds, that new crop circle that's been going around. Walk-ins was the one that I really was excited. I'm the most excited about the walk-ins talk, to be honest.
Yeah. So, this kind of piggybacks off last week and talking about this North Node, Mars, Uranus, and this very significant gate 2, which is the gate of the driver, of the vehicle. Mm-hmm. So in anybody's design, gate 2 is such a powerful force because it does, gate 2 is here in the G center. It determines our direction in life. It is the root of all action, gate 2. So in a sense, it's kind of like that that thing in the Matrix where they have the big cord in the back of their head, mm-hmm. and it's like plugging them into the Matrix. Well, right. This would be that similar idea for us, but except it's plugging us into like our higher self. So I was kind of feeling this energy of the transit, and I was also listening very deeply in client sessions, and just how different people are always kind of revealing what's going on in the collective, just getting to meet all these different beings. And it feels like, many of us have latent or dormant starseed energy, DNA. Many of us are even hybrids, either willingly in like birthing contracts, or, even some people who have been like genetically altered in the womb or early in life. So anyway, we have all this kind of latent coding, and it feels to me like this North Node Mars Uranus thing also could be somewhat of like a mass walk-in. But because everything is dualistic in nature, that also implies it's a mass walk out as well. So even within like the contracts that have been struck, the agreements, you know, in an intergalactic level that kind of have set us up to be certain starseed strains or certain hybrids, it's like those contracts will change from time to time, just like treaties change here on Earth between countries. And so this will definitely be a huge directional shift, and it also could be where a lot of people's ET self comes in and walks into the body. And it's not to say that it wipes our memory and we become this whole different person, but perhaps some of the knowledge or the just consciousness of that being can now inform our movements. You know, how much do we trust ourselves unless something really powerful like that is moving through us? So I feel like it's almost this reinforcement kind of vibe, but it's us just stepping more into us. And then at the same time, if you're kind of on that descending timeline and your gene code has been kind of altered by certain things, or just it's digressed, or maybe the gene code of many people is just kind of expired in a way, it's just like it's going to be a huge walkout point too. It's like the direction might change so drastically that you're kind of done in that body. So,
well, I like how you bring up that second gate is like in the Matrix, that plug-in.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because it's also this Mars, Uranus, North Node in Taurus, right? So when you really think about like this walk-in energy, it's almost like the natural container has to, if an energy walking in would need to have a natural kind of gene element to it, right?
Yeah.
But it's almost like kind of like coming in, and there could be, with all this crazy stuff going on with genetics right now and stuff, that like the way that you say, it's like it could be where the energy's so intense and the frequencies right now with Uranus are so high with the North Node, and then Mars just activating it, that it's pushing out people's energy because it's all the coding is wrong.
Yeah, it's almost like the soul or the ET energy tries to walk in, but it just gets rejected by the body because the body's coding cannot accept it. It's not coded properly.
And it's already, when you do have a walk-in experience, it already is a very harsh experience. It's very uncomfortable. So I could only imagine the uncomfort of, I'm trying to take in this energy and I can't, and it reminds me of almost like a ghost that flies through or something, like can't stick.
Yeah.
It's like unstickable, or the frequencies can't band together, like, and there are bands of frequencies, you know, and it's like the banding of them can't happen. And like it reminds me also of like in the physical reality of people walking out of our lives that just are not aligned right now. I was actually I've been talking with some people, and it's like it's kind of hard to be around certain people right now because if the frequency's off, it just literally is like you just like
friction,
and you have to do it with like love. It's not like a God thing. It's just more of like I gotta just and that kind of is like another way of looking at how it's playing in the physical of like I can't even walk into this situation anymore. I can't even be around this kind of energy right now.
It's like a really big no going back moment, I think, especially as you were saying, like we're moving into the second half of 2022, and it's like it is its own other story that we're about to walk into. And it's like, if you dip back into that old story, you know, that bridge might collapse in the meantime. Like you do not want to mess with old energies right now. Like don't do it. Not because it's somebody's graduation, not because it's somebody's like wedding, not because you feel like you should go because you have an open heart center, an undefined heart, and you're afraid of being that bad person. Like this is, we're in this new moon in Leo. It's all about self-leadership. Where are you leading yourself?
Right.
Is your higher self leading you, or is your not self leading you?
Yeah, and there was a lot of people talking recently, of course, about the day out of time from the dream spell calendar that we just went through. And I had talked about on a horoscope this week of it also is in the original, like actual Mayan calendar, because a lot of people don't realize the dream spell calendar came more recent in the 80s, right?
Right.
So a lot of people kind of connect that as the Mayan calendar, where it's like, well, it's a version of it, but it's like a newer version, like how human design was downloaded and created. That's why I think it's a great calendar. It's not like I'm talking crap on it. But like the original one, there's that moment of Waib, they call it, the 5 days of where they call it the unlucky days, because it's the days where the spirit realm can come in and out, which is like walk-in energy, right? And so we just went through that, and with this dark moon that's been happening, so it is kind of aligned with where you said you got this download after we did our show last week about Mars, Uranus, and the North Node, and we were going so deep into the monopole, right? And so it's interesting now, looking at when you got the download, it's like the highest version of the download I've ever heard of what's that Waib moment is every year, the 5 days in Waib, that literally is, they call it the unlucky days, but I only think it's unlucky if you're not coded correctly or you're not aware of energy, right? Like that's the whole point, right? It's like actually a very positive place for they weren't shamans in old Mayan culture, but they were like the shamans, the seers, and even the warriors weren't warriors like, of war. They were spiritual, warriors, right? And it's like those seers, knew that was a time where things get really weird for those that aren't paying attention or aren't awake.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting that we've gone through this now, and now we've just went through the day without time. And now we've entered into the first days that reset in that calendar, the dream spell calendar. And here we have this new moon. And now people are talking about the Lion's Gate. And I think we were both on the same page. I didn't know the Lion's Gate got extended now into July.
Oh yeah, it's like a month long.
I know now it's
extravaganza now.
I think even in our days when we used to do After Dark, it was like, the Lion's Gate. I
remember that episode.
Right, where it's a calendar that's not real. Like it's a Catholic calendar system. And like, so it's funny how the Lion's Gate thing is just every year getting more extreme, I guess, as far as bandwagony.
It's just another reason to celebrate Leo season. But like there is something to say about how when we start to imprint something with meaning, it does take on its own consciousness.
That's
just
true.
Like the gods and goddesses, of like whatever the etheric realm, like those beings hold their nature because millions of people worship them to be a certain way and expect them to be a certain way, and so they are. So just like that, we're worshiping Lionsgate in a sense, and it's becoming a realer and realer thing. It's taking on a life of its own.
Which I've always said that the real Lionsgate would be like powerful alignments in Leo, like a new moon in Leo, right? Like that, and it would be that would be the gateway, it would be the new moon here in Leo, and happens to be when Jupiter's going to retrograde the same day. So, to me, I feel like that's the gateway.
Yeah.
And I think it's always about bringing it back to the more simple stuff, like people don't realize, especially with leap years in the calendar system, like 8/8, the sun's position is different every 4 years, right? That we're transitioning always kind of, some people's birthdays aren't on their birthday because of the way the calendar's done. They don't realize it. They'll be celebrating their birthday and they'll be looking at their chart like, it was yesterday. Just did your solar return. And you do solar returns and stuff for human design, right? It's like, oh yeah, actually your solar return was like, yesterday, or maybe it's tomorrow, right? Like that's how messed up our calendar system is.
Yeah.
So when people get all obsessed with the numbers of the calendar, I'm always like, so last year the Lion Gate was at this degree and now it's not. Now it's at this degree. So we're going off the calendar opposed to the actual placement of the planets or the sun's position. That's kind of where I think when we talk about the splitting of worlds right now, like, it's kind of hard to bridge both worlds, especially time-wise, of a calendar system that is completely trying to keep you in that plugged-in matrix with just blank pages of days that go infinitely into nothing.
Yeah. Made up names.
Literally made up names. And only, of course, celebrating like holidays that are bank holidays and days where you don't have to work.
Right.
And then throwing in some, whether it's a country like America, like President's Day, or, you know, other nations and their days of independence, which is kind of laughable during these times, right? Mm-hmm. You know, when we're seeing independence being taken away so much, that it's almost like the one calendar I would not use at all.
I mean, just like we talked about weeks ago, like October, the 8th month,
right?
Not even in the right position.
Right.
August is just slotted in here.
Right.
Named after Roman emperor.
Yeah, exactly. After like, July, right? The only 2 months with 31 days. Like, how egoic is that? So
basically, yeah, it's just toxic patriarchy crap, more of that.
Which, you know, and that's what's kind of interesting because, you know, over the last couple of days, a crop circle popped up, which it kind of felt weird because it has been a long time since I had seen a crop circle.
Quiet. Yeah.
You know, and it happened on July 24th.
This one.
In the UK.
Look at this. You know, because there are multiple groups making crop circles. You know, there are, you know, more beneficial, we could say, guardian groups putting crop circles, but they tend to use more flowing and circular, like, geometry. This one has a lot of angles, spikes, you know, it's just very pointy in a lot of ways. And it's very reminiscent of the Masonic coat of arms, like the main insignia of the Masons or the Freemasons who...
Or even Star Trek, too.
Oh, right. Yeah. Star Trek. See, this one to me, but I was counting and like all of these different aspects, the circles, the points, it's all 8s. So I think maybe encoded in this one, not saying that it's, who knows who's encoding this stuff, but this one is kind of pointing to Lionsgate, 8-8.
Right.
With this perhaps apex of some kind. You know, because they're trying to say something here. And at the same time, it's kind of giving me vibes of like, okay, this is what made me think of the disclosure thing, you know, because they're showing us, look, we're showing you something from the perspective of like the Masons, of like the builders of the reality, of the actual structure that holds things in place, of that even traps consciousness in place. And it's like, I feel like this month of August, post this new moon, is going to kick off this like season of disclosure where the deeper elements of the mechanics of this matrix, you know, human design is the mechanics of the Maya. I would say that this Babylonian matrix, we're really going to see the underpinnings come to the surface. Because something else I've been kind of contemplating lately is that they're so non-creative. Like the beings that propagate control structures and all of these, you know, empires, basically, they put so much energy into like pulling the wool over our eyes or getting some huge initiative to pass where everybody's injecting something. And even that huge movement of energy gets like upended by one problem, and all of a sudden everybody knows the truth, you know? So it just shows like even this mass amount of energy and force that's being attempted to be used against humanity, it's very flat. It's very flimsy, actually.
Right.
As soon as we do anything, you know, as soon as we bring conscious awareness to anything, it just starts to disintegrate before our very eyes.
Yeah, and if you look at it as well, it does have like the interesting element of the horizon line with where the half circle is, and then there's the triangle below with the spheres, like almost like the middle Earth or the center of the Earth, and then the above, as above, so below, and then having, whether it is the compass that's in Freemason or it is Star Trek, or somebody in the chat said it's also the Space Force logo too, right? There is that punching through the, right, like the top part of the dome of
Oh wow.
See, it is the Space Force logo too. That's a good.
But
I forgot. There's so many people in the chat that I don't know who you are to give you credit, but good
So
eye.
this symbol is also the symbol of like the Galactic Federation.
Right.
So basically, Galactic Federation is propagated as like a beneficial collective of ET consciousness, but it's actually like the charlatan consciousness. So we talked about this with the White House thing, like we're your brothers from the stars, we're here to save you, and it's actually just more imposters, so this, just by the design alone, this to me feels like some imposter BS. It is just simply not organic. It's not beautiful enough. I know that may sound shallow, but it's just true. There isn't a sense of organic geometry to this at all.
Well, and I think it's interesting with the whole narrative going around the mainstream media right now about how shortages, and especially with crops, right? And then there's a beautiful field of crop that of course looks like it's been harvested, but it's regrowing and it's really nice. And then just stamping it in there, and with everything that they're trying to push in this kind of like architecture, wannabe masters of this reality, right? Everything from saying, now you're going to go eat insects now, and then actually in the last day, it shows how much money now is being invested in that food source. It's in the billions. And then even the Beyond Meat, which Bill Gates did and everything, billions are going into this insect thing.
Protein, yeah.
And I think people have to be really kind of, because now they're trying to say that it's environmentally bad to eat vegetables or be vegan. So it's like they're throwing everybody now in the same corner as whether you're a meat eater, right? It was like that was a bad thing. Now it's like, well, you're eating all the crops that we need now, but insects don't need to eat crops like grasshoppers and crickets. Like they can be harvested, which is crazy that they say they can be harvested in a lab to where that it doesn't put emissions out. I'm like, first of all, it's a laboratory. You're telling me that a laboratory with electricity and all these devices aren't doing some sort of weird chemical / environmental issues?
A pet snake that they've had to feed, like
know
that crickets stink. Like
I know
bugs in general are very, very stinky.
Right.
So
well, and that's the weird part too, right? Crickets are good luck. That's been always the spiritual thing, right? If you're in a room and a cricket comes, you don't kill it, right?
Yeah.
It's good luck. So or like a ladybug, let's say, right? Like those are the only two insects I can think of that are like, good luck, like, oh, you got a ladybug jump on you. I wouldn't be surprised if they're like trying to make it ladybugs, shakes
Souffle,
now or something. But it's like the one insect that is Jiminy Cricket, our consciousness to be our guide, right?
Interesting.
Right? That the good luck insect that whenever there's a cricket, I don't kill crickets. There's just like that, maybe, there is that thing about how conditioning and so forth in life, right? Of course. But the one insect of them all, that's what you're going to do. And when you bring up, especially like looking at how there could be like the UFO that comes, we're the right people and we're the good ones and all that, and it really being the fraud, and it is all connected to this whole like way of that crop circle showing like, look at this is exactly what the world is going, and this is how to wake up. Here's what UFOs are looking like right now. When you look at the tapes, especially, it's like I was in the military, like they're worse than VHS tracking tapes. Like the cameras are better than that. So they're playing with people. Mm-hmm. And it was weird because crop circles were so, there was a lot more of them, and then they just disappeared for a while, and then, it just pops up, and it pops up with the Space Force logo. The first thing I think everybody, including myself, said Mason right away. Mm-hmm. And I just feel like it's a kind of like an FU crop circle, like them being like we're in control and we can do whatever we want or something weird like that.
And you're gonna like it.
Yeah, and especially with all the 8s on there. Nothing against 8, because I actually think there's a lot of good things about 8, but I just feel that we are in higher realms than that. There is that infinity loop that comes with 8, right? And staying kind of in the loop. Or even 8.
Metaverse.
Right. Yeah, exactly. The metaverse. We talked about that, I think, in the first episode. And so I think it's something for people to right now, anything that's coming out, be very cautious before just jumping on the bandwagon of something. Because I think that the collective awakening that's happening is a lot more in our own souls than outside of our own souls.
Yeah. That's what this new moon is all about. You know, it's that again, it's like tapping into that higher self connection. And the higher self connection, when we look at the body graph, it's not up here. Like, this is not higher self stuff. It's coming in through the horizontal, plane. This is actually where the action is taking place. And it's through the voice that's coming up out of the body, not through something you've seen with your eyes. You've taken in, you've locked in that belief, and then you take action because of it. This is truth that's erupting out of you in spontaneous response to life, or through an invitation that you receive to speak. Like, everybody is kind of taking on a self-projected projector kind of authority right now. Not actually, but they're experiencing this essence of what we're saying has a certain ring to it. A lot of what we're saying doesn't have that ring to it, but a small bandwidth of what we're saying has a ring to it. If we can listen for that ring, if we can listen for that frequency, that resonance, that's where the truth is.
And self-projected projectors are rare. They're very small.
Only 4%.
And I think that you bring up the best point, because actually I was this weekend thinking about it. It's like, when it comes to manifestation, when it comes to being in this higher dimensional state, it doesn't matter, what design you are. There's the response, right? It's not mental.
Yeah, no.
The invitation is not mental. It's definitely more when you feel the guidance that you can, through the understanding of a feeling that's going to come, that's like, this feels like the invitation of the world I'm going to go project into, that I'm going to help guide. And even I don't know, being a manifester, I guess, can just go for wherever it wants to go, but it has to still inform, right? So there is this whole, like, not mental way, right? The mind is not the way to define your reality.
This is like the final 5 years of the mind's movie. This is like, we're completing the mental process, period, as we're moving more into the solar plexus process, and we have been nurturing and exploring the solar plexus process, and that's where the greatest leaps in our consciousness are happening. But this is kind of like, in a sense, anytime that it's the end of something, there's going to be this spike in extremism. And so that's just like, when something's going out of style, or even when somebody is about to pass away, usually they have this big surge of energy before they go away. So right now, the mind, the mental realm, is having its last big surge of, hold on to that concept, hold on to that idea. That is the truth. Oh my gosh, that's the truth over there. Let's all stick this onto our faces and believe that this is the truth now. So there's this frenzy just in the collective field to find that certainty, to find the key, to find the truth. But it's not found on the mental plane. That's the whole trick here. And
to me, it's like taking the crop circle, for example, right now. It's the invitation of whether you're going to take that invite to that projected reality or not.
Exactly.
Right? Like, this is where you just don't take every invitation either, right? You want to take it from a place that actually has, I think, a common sense understanding from your deeper inner knowing, instead of something that's coming externally that doesn't feel like you want to be part of that movie or part of that projection field. Because who knows what that projection field, it might look good, but behind that door, you don't want to get stuck in loops right now. And especially when you're bringing up especially this walk-in energy, right? It's like, there's also the invitation to invite in a walk-in energy that you don't want too.
That third seat in our design, somebody can jump in there and stick with you for a lifetime. Because unless you know a really good exorcist, it's not easy to get that thing out.
No, I don't think the exorcists that were around for Emily Rose are still around, So, and that was a crazy exorcism back in the day. And that movie was actually the craziest horror movie because it was a true story. And to me, it was the craziest part was in the way that it was almost like too surreal, the way that like there was, I think it was about like the letter that like, I don't know, was later on. It was that movie was crazy, but that's not something I want to go through. But earlier we were talking about, I was asleep earlier and you had felt like, I feel like David's asleep right now because we're later tonight doing the live show. And I was. And it's like, that's where this collective awakening is happening, is in our telepathy between others, that we're all in the same, I would say timeline right now that's in the divine, that's beautiful and natural and doing this work. A lot of us are connecting, and that's where I think the collective awakening is happening, is internally, opposed to getting lost in these external kind of things where we really don't know what is doing it. And when I saw it, and then as a manifesting generator, I didn't get a gut, oh yeah, for sure, like, that's it. It felt almost like, what? Didn't make me feel like, yay, these are the angels or even the ETs that are here to show us that things are good or something. It didn't feel that way. And that kind of goes with this whole circle world thing going around the last couple of days, which it's blowing my mind how much it's going around.
It's that frenzy for the next truth.
Right. So to show people it, I mean, they want to, this group that's putting it out is Nos Confunden, which means the confused ones, if I'm pretty sure. And so this is on their Telegram. So I'm posting it from their page. And it was funny because we all looked at it together here at High Vibe. And I think it was good that, three people looking at something together is a lot better than individually looking at it, because it's like kind of like we're all kind of like, But the way that the natural like universe comes together, especially as an astrologer looking at like stars like Aldebaran, and then looking at like, oh, okay, they had the land of angels there, right? Like, okay, that makes sense. Like, these are all coming from stories. The picture says it's coming from stories, that this map is a projection. So I'm already ding, ding, ding. This is a little red flaggy to me. It's a projection, right? Like, especially looking at what we're seeing for the human design for this new moon. And this is what built up during the day without time, because I think they just posted this July 8th. So this has been going around for the last couple weeks. And I just don't, this is too much. And you said this looked like, somebody's projection in their brain, like literal.
Yeah.
And then they even have membrane on there, right? Like, it's kind of interesting, the dark membrane. And it feels very chaotic and not in alignment. It just does not feel like it's in alignment at all. And I know there's a lot of people sending me it and really into it. But personally, I'm just going to say, I'm sorry, but this is just too much, especially that there's no, as an astrologer, it's been used for we actually don't even know the amount of thousands of years, but it's at least Mesopotamia. So we can go back 6,000 years. I Ching, that's part of human design with astrology, one of the oldest systems going back 4,000 years. So those systems help us to make predictions or help us to understand a soul or what's going on in our timeline shifts. And this map does everything opposite of that. Nothing is in alignment. There should be the exact opposite of Aldebaran, which would be Antares, and I can't find it anywhere. They have the Pleiades all shifted out of alignment in a way, and then they're putting the lords of the planets, and then they're throwing things like the second Earth, lands of clones. It looks like somebody did a bunch of drugs and like played Minecraft for spirituality.
Yeah. It's just like the crop circle. It's lacking any sense of divine order and like that organic flow, because like just look at nature, you know. No, nature isn't perfectly symmetrical. That's not what I'm saying, but it does have a organic flow to it. This is just, you know, kind of slapped together. Sorry, people that made this. I don't mean to offend you, but it does. It just feels like erroneous.
Well, I mean, they put it right there. This map is a projection
based on information from books.
Right. So it's like, and you know, like I get the ice wall thing and the flat earth thing that's going around for a long time, because humans thought we lived flat earth forever. But like this is taking it to like, this is where Jupiter Neptune's influence of 2022, people need to pay attention, because this is where you can take the out of bounds energy of Pisces, with Jupiter and Neptune being the rulers of Pisces, and then being in the same sign right now, and even in the helio right now, that's where they're at. They're both together in Pisces, and Jupiter's nearing the end of Pisces right now in helio astrology. So it's like, this is where things can go way too far, out of bounds.
Yeah.
And that's where I think the spiritual community just needs to have like a little bit of a check on things, to make sure that you're not getting, and that's where Virgo comes in, right? Like that in order a little bit that feels divine and pure. Mm-hmm. This feels chaotic to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I think it's just a great test of our discernment as a community, right? Because these things are going to be presented to us left and right as like the next solution, the next key. And we have to be able to feel from that self-projected place. Not from what our mind is like, well, it could be. It looks kind of like that. Like the mind is always vacillating, comparing,
right?
You know, trying to just control. But if it doesn't have that true resonance within your G center, like if you don't feel pulled towards it, or you don't feel that you yourself could be embodied through what you're looking at, it doesn't have the right coding. It doesn't have the right capacity to hold consciousness. So, yeah, circle world.
I mean, it's kind of funny, right? Circle world, it kind of reminds me of like a clown, like a circus a little bit.
Circus world.
Circus world.
Not to be confused with astro world.
Yeah, I mean, you know, but I think that's where right now, with this collective awakening happening, it's like, it's a great thing, but it has boundaries too, where we gotta have something, and to see the human design new moon chart, that blows my mind. Like self-projected projector is very rare, 4%, and there's no rooting, there's no sacral intelligence at all. There's no, you know, even the solar plexus is undefined, and the spleen. So it kind of is a little bit scary to me, this new moon, of taking things in creation too far with the Jupiter Neptune, and with Jupiter retrograding on the day of this new moon, which happens to be up in the Anja.
Gate 17.
Right? That it's like creating stories is great and creating imagination is great, but when we're trying to be in a divine mission and divine work, like before you throw your hypothesis out there, you know, you don't want to take some stuff that's just too far without having done a lot of the work and a lot of the, and that's why I guess as a generator, manifesting generator, I like having sacral intelligence to be able to be like this feels like a yes, and this feels like a no, and this feels like there's not even a feeling. It's not even like a hard no, and it's not a hard yes. So it's like that's still a no. It's a good lesson, I think, for people of responding in life where it feels flat, and that's what's really interesting. Is like it feels not exciting. It doesn't feel. It feels almost like kind of sad, like kind of like disorderly.
It doesn't guide you into a greater understanding. It just says, "Oh, here it all is. Okay, now what? Like, let's set sail and go to the lands of Andromeda. Next door. Apparently,
just climb the ice. Make sure you have an ice pick, bro.
Where is this ice? How is this ice being maintained? Like, tell me that. How do they do the ice?" But, with this new moon chart, it's really interesting. Like you were saying, like if we really just look at the definition, it's not rooted in sacral intelligence. It's not rooted in emotional intelligence. So it's not grounded, which means that
there's nothing in the ego center either at all. Defined, nothing, not even a gate.
And it's the nodes that are connecting the ajna to the throat here. So it's like, this can be because that's what I love about self-projected projectors. They're so pure in their vibration. Like that strong force of like soul leadership that they carry, even though it is more delicate and subtle, it's very just pure in its frequency. So like with anything, there's extremes. We can have a very extremely pure direction, especially with already Mars Uranus and gate 2 here kind of pushing us, from the base of the G center or pulling us. And then we're expressing out this very pure, probably very simple vibration. There's a divine simplicity to this.
What's up with the incarnation cross being JX influence?
So that's another reason why this is a very kind of rare moon, because
I was going to say that I've never even
design.
It's not left or right angle. It's
juxtaposition, which is also a very rare minority, which is only about 4%. So it's called juxtaposition because left angle is transpersonal karma.
Right.
People are here to clean up the karma like you. Right angle is personal destiny. People who are here to establish their identity. That's like me. And then juxtaposition is right down the middle, and it's called fixed fate, which means that there is no choice in a juxtaposition person's life because they're the binding of the book. They're the binding of the double helix of the DNA.
Wow.
So what they do and like what the purpose of a juxtaposition person is to bring people onto that path, like to bring people onto that, soul group basically, or not, So this is like, because I love to see things as dualistic because it's more accurate. It's like, yes, this could be the most aligning, just snapping you into perfect alignment kind of moon, especially if you're really tuning into that higher self vibration. But this could be also getting onto the wrong train tracks, and then you're stuck on those tracks, and it's a fixed fate in a direction maybe you don't love.
Well, it's interesting because in the last time Jupiter and Neptune were in Pisces in 1856 was the Great Train Wreck of 1856.
Ooh.
Where two trains heading in this, you can look it up, the Great Train Wreck of 1856. Two trains heading on the same tracks smashed into each other and blew up, and it was July 17th, 1856. And when you look at that picture, that was the Wikipedia one, that first one, that was the painting of it. And it was a Quaker woman who left her house right afterwards and went out and started to go and save people.
Wow.
And it was really bad. Like it was the first big, great train wreck of all time. And I think it's one of the top train wrecks still to this day. And we have to be careful because this is where it reminds me of CERN and the collider, right? The idea of two sides and bringing particles and having them go on the same tracks to meet in the middle and having a big train wreck, right? That's what they're doing. And I feel like with this energy, and you just blew my mind the most. I think the most potent information that has been said today is looking at that incarnation cross of that juxtaposition. Because I feel like this fixed fate energy, and especially having to take the right invitation at this moment or just waiting for invitation. Because that's the whole, I think, most important part of a projector is, hey, just do your research, chill, and wait for the invitation. It's not so much about taking it. It's about waiting for the right invitation. And there's things that are being thrown up. Like, I hate to say it, but this Lionsgate thing, it used to be 8/8. Now I'm seeing so many people saying it's these huge windows. Like, oh, no. It's July into August, like 11th now. I'm like, oh, wait, what? Like, and I'm just like, no, I'm not taking that invitation right now. And I think that's the hardest part about being a projector, I'm assuming, right, is I'm sure it could get really hard to wait for the right invitation. So eventually projectors have to learn through really weird experiences of taking the wrong invitations. And
having to go all the way down that track. You know, you can't just get off at the first stop on an invitation. You're locked into that energy. And it will take you wherever it's going to take you, even if that means it takes every last breath from you before it stops. I
mean, Ross says in an amazing projector, it's like a 2-hour thing, like talk he did on projectors, that projectors go through 7-year windows of like, okay, relationships, you're going to learn for 7 years of every invitation that you've taken of, oh, you thought, now I've learned the next one. No, it's like 7-year cycles or 7-year cycles of your career not going in the right way to learn. And then 7 years of whatever the issue might be around the invitations that you're taking. And that really blew my mind because that's like Saturn cycles, right? 7-year cycles, which are kind of like, they're great because I think that's what makes a good guide, right? Like, and that's what he says is what makes a good guide is actually the failed invitations that you take. And that always stuck with me now. And especially seeing this, it's like, we all, I think, need to pay attention to in this new moon and in this time with Mars, Uranus and the North Node conjuncting of like, am I really going to do another 7 years of the same stuff? Or have I really learned to take the correct invitations right now? And not just because I know it's a time that we've all been through where there's been a lot of patience that's been needed. And there's been restrictions that we have to be aware of in Pluto's position. And I think that this is a moment where it's like you just can't throw it all to the wind without it having a huge feeling of a yes from spirit that feels like in alignment. And I think that's where the parts of the higher part of the brain and so forth, the crown and everything, has to have this common sense and also have to actually have some sort of like factual basis to make sense before just taking anything on.
I think that also what I've noticed is that there's so many people that, because we've been in this slower waiting process, are really hungry for that next thing. You know, they want that next invitation. They want that next clear breakthrough. They want that next clear path. And the reason I believe that a lot of us are not getting that is not because we're out of alignment. It's because the entire process of what it looks like to do this thing we call life in this like dimension and in this transition period between two eras is changing. Like, we're going from this very focused, logical, like, okay, here's the thing, I'm doing it, I'm making it happen, I'm creating it, and then I'm going to get that satisfying conclusion. That is kind of going out of style. Like, we're going to see that. That's why all these systems are collapsing, all these institutions of, you know, the Maya, the Matrix, because what they hold up, what they uphold is no longer valid. It's no longer needed. And it's not this just going after your dreams kind of thing. It's more about moving into this deeper embodiment of self, and it's about being. And a lot of people still don't know how to just be. And that's why they're not being given the next, you know, bone on their, or, you know, the next clue or the next step or the next doorway, because they haven't yet fully arrived as themselves. And they're looking for that next thing to show them who they are, or prove to them, you know, that they're the best, or that money to make them feel like they're more secure. And yet they haven't even fully shown up in their own recognition of themselves yet. And I think that's what so many people are being subtly asked to do right now, is like really recognize themselves first. Any projector is only going to be as good a guide, you know, by recognition and invitation if they've recognized themselves first.
Right. Well, at the same time, it reminds me of the time systems that we're in right now, where part of that embodiment issue is still being embodied in whether it's the calendar system that we're in, right? Like we're doing this show we started it after midnight, right? It's still before dawn, but it's like one of those things where it's like, that's just the way that the embodiment of our true selves were able to show up today.
Exactly.
And instead of freaking out or being lost in the time systems of embodying outside of your natural self and what might seem normal, because I think that's the other, I think, really weird part is, the embodiment is going to feel abnormal to a system that isn't normal. Like, so this is an inversion happening. But at the same time, when you take something like the crop circle or the circle world thing, it's easy when people are starting to embed them in themselves, but also like wanting to find things that are you just don't take anything because it's different and say that it is embodying it, because it's almost like people are starting to create, as they awake or as they embody into their true self, anything that's just completely off the system and different as, oh, then that means it's true. But it's like, no, that doesn't, like right now, like I could just say right now that Nibiru is really Pluto and they've been hiding it from people the whole time, right? Like I could just say that and say that's why they took it off the planet list. And right. And I could just say that right now, right? And some people would just go, yeah. But like, I have no basis in that because it's Pluto. And it was discovered, and we've been using Pluto since we found it in 1930, and it works, right? So why would I now switch it to Nibiru? Like, it's like, I think there's this great awakening happening, but in that, not everything is a conspiracy. Not everything is, and it's like, that's why you see people that are doing this work have patience to do the research and to also, sit with things and wait for the right downloads to come. And those downloads are going to work. They're going to work. They're going to have something that actually helps humanity. Like human design and the download that Ra got, that has been something that has helped humanity so much. The download of even astrology from all the different civilizations over all these millennia, that works.
It works.
When something like this circle world comes, where is it fundamentally helping society and individual people embody themselves better? That's my question, because it's like, how does this help me as an astrologer? How does this help me understand myself better? Okay, maybe it might make me help understand the environment we're living in, but this doesn't help me at all.
Yeah, it's completely ungrounded.
Part of the story that I was reading about on the page was that this is showing that it's more of a physical reality, and that's why we're feeling the energy of the ETs or our ancestral roots from other star systems, because they're literally next to us on the physical plane on the other side of different circle world ice walls. Where to me, as somebody who, if we use that understanding of the monopole and the G center and having a knowing, it doesn't have to be physical.
It's multidimensional.
Correct. So it's like, this is a trap of bringing people, like this is opposite of what the work has been for so long, is getting people to understand spirit, which is separate than your soul, right? Like spirit is the ethereal presence of the divine. And this is trying to take spirit away
and mash it all back into matter,
just like CERN.
And yeah, exactly.
And of course, this would come out right after CERN, right? So some, and I hate to say it, I don't know if we could show this picture again, Brian, but off this guy's page and what everybody's pushing, it looks like the craziness of his brain, and it looks like tumors in the brain.
Well, it looks like the holes that form in your brain when you've inhaled too much toxic substances. Like, they would say, oh, make your brain into Swiss cheese. That's what it looks like to me.
Yeah. I mean, what also it looks like? It looks like the weird stuff that's going on in a cancer patient. And it also even looks like the weird stuff that we're seeing in the cells of people who got the shot.
Who knows what it is? Pollux, maybe.
And, you know, I think that this Mars Uranus North Node too is to be careful of what direction you take of too crazy.
Mm-hmm. Too radical.
And don't want to end up like in a great train wreck of 1856, or even just a train wreck in your own life right now. I think that, you know, it's better to stay with systems right now as we wait for the right invitations of multidimensional energies or partnerships or anything that really align with our code individually, that we've understood through the embedding in that code, instead of just taking on radically different places without any merit or any rooting in, like, I hate to say it, but there's just zero rooting in this kind of, I get, it's just a thought. It's a
simulated truth.
It's a map of a projection.
Yeah.
And when you read that, you have to start going, that's a red flag right away. This is a map of a projection? Like, okay, so that's the projected understanding of things, and people are taking this as literal.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not literal. It's and you know what? I think it's maybe just a cool way of looking at all the different, you know, spheres and understanding them. But that's it. It's not literal. There's no way that this can be proven as literal. Like, there's no literal way for this person, whoever created it, to literally say that this is truth.
And that's like, you know, one of these tests that we're facing in the final age, you know, the final years of the age of the mind, is like, the mind is the witness, the mind is the passenger. It's never meant to believe that it's in control, or that the truths or the sub-truths that it, you know, finds in its life are something to take action on. Like, that's the whole work of human design, is showing you that your mind is helpless and incompetent. It does not have the capacity to know the truth. Only your form, which is a part of this life and which generates this life, is the thing that can show you how to live this life as yourself. So the more it's like, we don't need any more programming. We don't need any more context even. It doesn't matter, because we're being guided from this inner place.
Yes.
And that's what this moon is all about. It's like just this symbolic even expression from the universe of like, look, it can only come from within right now. If you're listening to anything on the external, no matter how shiny it is, no matter like how many answers, you know, how many questions it answers by showing up in your world, it's not what we need. It's just not what we need right now. It's not nourishing.
No.
North Node and Taurus, it's not nourishing to us. It's just more brain candy. It's just more mind candy, stuff that our mind loves to just chew on, and it doesn't have any atomic weight.
No.
And that's the thing that we need to be really using our intuition and tapping into our inner authority around, is like, whose voice has atomic weight? Whose words has atomic weight? Which invitations have that true potency in the field?
Yeah.
And what is just a bunch of words, you know, pictures,
right,
theories, concepts, nothing to base your life off of, like nothing to base your future off of.
Right. And like last night on my show with Brian on Spiritual Daddy, we talked about twin flames, and I showed a lot of images to people about like, if the twin flame theory is true, here's the old hermetic understanding of masculine and feminine, and that there is this coming together, and there is this way to reach the understandings of the divine through that. Mm-hmm. So I was like, at least trying to show that here's some rooting to it, opposed to just the twin flame theory, just like without any basis, right? But in human design, when I run connection charts, that was like one of the biggest things that ever really made me wake up to looking at my energy with other people, was realizing, oh, that's a 5-4 connection. Like, there's a lot of open space here. Mm-hmm. And no wonder this feels like could come in and then come out. Like, it's almost like those are like walk-ins to me, the 5-4 connections. And then when I've found 9-0 connections in my life, I'm like, wow, there's like not a lot of space, or it feels like I'm lost in time with this person for eternity, and I'm not even I forgot about everything else. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like one of those things where it's like, is 9-0 the best? Is 5-4 the worst? Maybe, yeah.
I've been in some terrible 9-0s.
Right, because it's...
where you're just electromagnetically stuck to the other person, and something in you is saying, we're interested in this, but if your minds are on different pages, then it's like being energetically chained to somebody who's really grating to you. So... well, it's interesting because there's some people who are full-blown 9-0 as who they are. Yeah, imagine
and so that means everybody that they meet, they're a 9-0. Like every single person on the planet.
That doesn't sound fun to me.
No. And, you know, I mean, and that's just, but that's maybe whatever that karma of that soul is, right?
They got a lot of energy to get out, that's for sure.
Right. But then there's that whole, you know, part where it's like, I don't know, like it's nice to have a little space, right? Like to bring in maybe a child, or bring in, you know, maybe work together and other things that can kind of help kind of be in the relationship, right? So it's like, it's one of those things where I think people can get maybe a little too caught up, like already like, 6-3, no, not as good. I'm looking only for an 8-1. I'm only looking for a 9. It's like, you can't, I think, like, again, it's like one of those things that we see in astrology, right? Like, oh, they're a fire sign, I'm an earth sign, that won't work. It's like, well, that's not true, you know? And I feel like that's where this like embodiment of who we are and what we take on in our lives, and using a lot of these tools, you know, it's one of those things to where we can't create too many biases on some of them. We want to see like what's the universe really bringing together here, and break it all down to understand what it is. And if it feels really good to that inner knowing, then you use a composite chart in astrology, a connection chart in human design to understand the connection, opposed to judge the connection before even going through it.
Right. Because you can't generalize. You really can't generalize. And that's the whole beauty of it, is that there is its own alchemy in each connection. So if you judge it just on the surface of what you think is there, you're cutting yourself off from the cognitive alchemy that's there. But like even the way that Ross said, like looking at a chart, looking at the open centers or defined centers, you know, when you have nothing in a given center, if you have that center completely open, I always read that as you're done. Like you've graduated from that aspect. Just like looking at a reflector's chart is kind of looking at somebody who has kind of finished most of the work in the incarnative process, and they get to kind of come back as this witness and kind of experience all and taste all the flavors of the rainbow. But the same thing I think would be said for these you know, connections. Is like when you look at the open centers that you have when you're in a connection chart, you're looking what you've already completed, perhaps.
That's a huge new perspective.
And especially when, you know, again, gates, I mean, centers with no gates, like these can be non-issues for you. So some people might see that they have a completely open heart and they're like, wow, my heart's so vulnerable. Like, I
have to prove something.
Right. But actually, you can be the one that doesn't even play that game because you have no connection to it. So you're completely outside of the ego, self-worth, insecurity, whole trip if you're actually in alignment. Now, if you're not in alignment and you have no gates in the center, you can be sunk into that thing so deep that you don't even know which way is up. So it can be, you know, quite a thing. But when you also look at your undefined centers that have a little bit of definition in them, these are your core lessons. This is the last, you know, pieces of what you're working through in this center. So this...
Yeah, I definitely wanted to ask you about connection charts because I think they're really important of trying to understand connections just as much as in astrology using a composite chart or even synastry, right? Because it's kind of all of it in one, a connection chart. That's what I think is the best part of human design, is like it's taking astrology to advance new levels to where it's like, wow, that's doing synastry for me. It's doing composite for me in a weird way. and it's doing it all in one chart. Whereas like astrology doesn't have that. Astrology has to separate. I have to go, okay, here's the synastry chart. Okay, now let me do the composite chart. Okay, now let me do the Davison chart. Okay, let me do the progressed composite chart, which a lot of people don't even do. I teach that in my more advanced courses, right? Because like some people don't understand, like, oh, the relationship progression of the composite, like it's progressed now to this hard spot, you know? Mm-hmm. So it's like, oh, but everything else is good, but there's the progression now, you know? But with the connection charts, like you're just showing right now, it's interesting because you can also do it with the transits.
I mean, that's what I was going to say.
Of the new moon,
that's how
right?
we actually even do a transit. We make a connection chart between your design and the transiting influences, and it creates this quantum. That's why we call it quantum transit. It's like this synthesis of both, and it shows you who you're becoming through this transit. Now, does that mean that that's your fate to have to become this person right now? No. It's showing you the transiting influences. If you're living your design is naturally going to take in the aspects and the influences that are beneficial to your process, and it's going to exclude the rest. And that's the beauty of actually practicing your strategy and authority, is it's doing all that for you. Like it's taking the best of, it's incorporating it in your monopole, in your direction, in your story. And the other stuff, you may not even feel it. But
we were born in the same place.
Yeah, we were. Same hospital?
Yeah.
Hogue. When you look at that hospital, when you drive by it, it really does look like you can almost picture the soul. It's just like dropping in there.
It trips me out.
Yeah.
But it's crazy. You and I were born and literally we came out of the exact same portal.
Yeah. Makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense. I just noticed that. I was like looking, I'm like, oh, that's trippy. But it's interesting because like this new moon is filling up your solar plexus and your root chakra and your anja. So,
yeah. I'm emotionally defined right now this week because of the 39. So I have no truth in the now at this time, being an emotionally defined person right now. So, because, you know, emotionally defined people always have to wait out for that emotional wave to bring the clarity over time. So me knowing right now in the moment is not possible. And also I know that I'm going to be going through more emotional ups and downs because I'm defined, whereas normally I'm not.
That's interesting because you are sacrally defined, right? So whenever the solar plexus is defined, it overpowers the sacral, mm-hmm. right? So that's why you see people that are emotionally defined always have that solar plexus defined with mm-hmm. the sacral, like in generators or manifesting generators, or even there's projectors who can be emotional projectors too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or emotional manifestors too, right?
Yeah. It's been really cool.
That's the only thing that I see that's the most common is like there's emotional, that solar plexus takes over the strongest.
Because it's 50% of people that have the solar plexus defined. And what's crazy is all the gates of the solar plexus are Pisces, Aquarius, Pisces, Aquarius, and one Virgo gate. So I don't know. That's just interesting to me. It just feels like...
Is that Virgo gate the 6, right? Isn't that what connects over to the sacral?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's really the one that generates the whole emotional wave anyway. So it's the 59-6, which is the channel of mating, is all Virgo.
It embodies it, I guess, right, into the physical.
Well, yeah, it's the only one that can hold that much energy and bring it and like, you know, channel it basically without it being destructive. But what the solar plexus really is, you know, that I've kind of put together through my downloads is when Atlantis fell, you know, we had a huge, just basically like quantum divot put into our planetary energy bodies and our own genetics. We suffered a great disconnect, and it was actually the 3D and the 5D split that happened from the cataclysm of Atlantis, which means the third dimensional aspects of our DNA and the fifth dimensional aspects no longer could communicate. And so the resulting issue was that the byproduct was we created an ego. The ego was this new disembodied thing that was like, oh my God, I got to save myself. I got to freaking survive because I have no connection to source anymore. And I just, you know, I'm here on my own. So a big part of what the solar plexus mutation represents is a way that nature herself, through our bodies, has circumnavigated this huge wound in our genetics and is finding a new way for us to literally create a hub that we can connect to our 5D self. And that's the place where you and I are thinking in the same consciousness. That's where,
right,
you know, we are really actually able to see and feel and know and experience that we are all one energy, just experiencing itself through different filters, different timelines.
So do you think that what's defining for you with this new moon in the solar plexus is because you have the 59th gate in your chart?
No, it's the 39 that's doing this for me right now.
Got you.
So all the purple in the middle part is the transit. So
I see.
It's the 39 that's connecting to my 55 sun up here.
I see.
So this is my Venus. No, that's current Venus. And so, yeah. But still, it's kind of disembodied. It's not connected to the throat. It's not connected to my main definition. It's just kind of doing its own thing, floating out there in space, and then maybe I'll get, you know, some emotional recognition moments or some kind of catharsis, and that'll kind of shift the energy. But it's definitely not a time for me to think that I'm certain in any moment, because I'm only going to see the certainty in retrospect because of the emotional nature.
So if like somebody is like see how the spleen is completely empty, because you have an empty spleen, right? Undefined spleen with no gates.
Yeah.
That means it's probably pretty hard to actually get unless the gates that are defined in the spleen that get transited to the ones that are in your root chakra, right? That's the only time that it'll actually pop that into gear.
For me. But also the 57, because it kind of connects into all my integration.
Oh, I see.
That's probably the most likely one because it's such a strong electromagnetic.
And that one's probably a different feeling than the other ones.
Oh, yeah.
Because that one's those are channels that are already defined and already.
Plus, anytime that, you know, it's from the root, it's got a whole different energy than if it's connecting up to the throat. Like, these are very tough. You know, these are very, very pressurized energies that require a lot of exertion, basically. They want to get a lot of energy out. Whereas these are more about probably, you know, sensing our environment, making the connection, expressing something. So
that makes sense because they're actually looking at the centers that are about expressing, whereas the other ones lower are with the root.
Which are just about pure.
Right. That's interesting. Because I like seeing that, I was like, Because like you and I are flipped. Like my solar plexus is empty with no defined gates. And yours is the spleen. So I was like, that's kind of an interesting flip as I'm thinking about, like, I don't have anything on the whole entire right side. So I don't.
Except gate 51.
Right.
Which I wouldn't discount that. That's like very powerful, shocking energy.
But for me, this new moon chart probably doesn't define my emotional centers, probably.
Yeah, because it's hard for you to get those.
Yep. Knew it. I was like, yeah, no. That's interesting. That kind of trips me out a little bit, actually. Because that's where I think if people were to really look at this kind of stuff with human design, it's like when we set ourselves up to come into this reality, like we literally set ourselves up for reasons. And as an astrologer, that's what I've always looked at astrology charts, and I do the same with human design. Because when I break that down, I'm like, yeah, there's not going to be a lot of moments that I'm going to want to have emotional definition here.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then it makes sense with your description that was just like about 10 minutes ago about that might be an area that I've done a lot of past life work in, so much that this life I'm like, okay, done with the fucking emotional center shit. Right? Where it's like, that's the kind of crazy stuff where I think people have to, instead of like looking at the crop circles to define your life or
Or like looking at an open center and being like, oh, I'm empty there. I don't have anything there. It's like, no, congratulations, you don't have anything there. You're done. Like
it's like in astrology when people are like, I have no planets in these houses. I'm like, great, that's a good thing. I'm like, there's no work there. Mm-hmm. Like people feel like I'm like, you're not going to find an astrology chart with every house having something in it. Like it's very rare. I mean, it's possible, but it's very rare. And it's like, it's like one of those, it's the same concept. It's like, it's okay that you don't have planets in a house. It's okay to have an empty house in astrology. It's okay. It's not a bad thing. Because especially when things are transiting that place, sure, there might be a square, there might be an opposition or something, but that house is a lot easier to deal with, the transit, than the ones where there's a lot of stuff going on. When there's a lot of stuff going on, holy crap, it's going to be way more intense. Like a Saturn return, for example. Like that's going to be intense because that house has Saturn in it. So that house is going to be popping crazy.
Yeah.
Whereas when Saturn's in a house that doesn't have Saturn in it, or it's not aspecting Saturn, you're not going to feel Saturn as much.
Yeah. I can attest to that. Having Saturn going through my 6th planet stellium in Capricorn during my Saturn return.
Right. And that's a lot.
That was a lot. But like now, like my 11th house, all this Taurus stuff in my 11th, it's like, yeah, this is fun.
It's
cool
fun.
Stuff is happening.
Yeah, and it's an area where you have, I think, it's more of like an understanding of like a freedom element to kind of be like, I don't need to do so much work in this area right now. Oh, thank God,
It's almost like you could say, because you're more open there, it's easier for you to receive in those areas from life.
Well, I think the whole basis of spirituality, quote unquote, is about the inner work, and so right now especially, it's like you want the answers, like they're really, really, literally inside of you, and using things like astrology, human design, are really things where you can really look at your coding and really look at what's going on, using the transit of the new moon that's happening, or this Mars and North Node Uranus we did last week, and like looking in how it does affect you in your life, how it does affect you in your charts, and you're going to get so many answers inside.
Right. But it's only the beginning of the conversation.
Correct.
These tools are just there to open the door to develop the relationship with yourself organically within your own life, and to know that, again, this is the mind, and the mind wants to look at stuff. It wants to be certain about something, and that's a great way to start. But embodiment, that is the future. That is the now. And there's so much more richness in embodiment because you are the source of what you're experiencing. You're not just taking something and slapping it on and being like, okay, that's what I think. Cool. Maybe you'll never know what you think. That's probably a great place to be. Never needing to know, that's a really great place to be because you're experiencing it. You don't need to know it.
Right. And I think it's like, it reminds me of like, and I'm just going to bring up, and I know because this is what I'm channeling. It's like, I like Alex Jones. I've always thought he's been an amazing guy, right? But if you think about how everything in his life is defined by, like how we were looking at the crop circle, or we were looking at the circle world. So I'm like now throwing it kind of outside of spiritual realms, even though he does go into some of those realms. Mm-hmm. And I actually agree with some of the spiritual stuff he brings up. But it's the defining of the identity for him off all these, paperwork that unveils the secrets of what's really going on, of world domination plans to whatever. Same thing in spirituality, where some people are defining their life off these external like thought ideas, or like somebody creating a circle world chart like map thing, right? And then defining their whole life by it, right? Where it's like, okay, like what about what's within you? Like what's within yourself that's defining yourself and embodying within yourself. And I think that's where Alex Jones did better, of course, in life when he started bringing up his own stuff that he brought to the table, opposed to it only being defined by the things that are crazy that are out there, but like helping people to wake up to the things and being like, but it's within himself of how he does that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And I think like that's where it's like, that feels a lot stronger than just throwing out the chum.
Just more stuff, yeah.
Right? Or that's what the news does, right? The news isn't allowed to put their own true spin on it, because they've got producers, they've got directors, they've got owners of the networks. So here's the info that the world needs to go listen to, that they say. And then if they're to really express their true embodiment of their self, they can get fired. So it's like, oh, go out and you're not allowed to leave your house today. And like, but inside, gosh, is that what you really think? It's like, no, I got to keep my job and I got to say what the prompter says. And I'm allowed to throw my opinions when I do opinion pieces at a news network, right? People are allowed to throw their opinions in politics or whatever. But it's like, gosh, I'm on this network and it's much more left or it's much more right. So it's like, I have to kind of maybe do this. I don't want to rub it too much, or then they're going to fire me and I'm gone. So that's why we're seeing so much in the world right now of like fake embodiment of ideology, or fake embodiment of the system and how it should be, and people not really having the courage to go inside. Because the courage of Leo here is to be willing to go in yourself and be okay. And especially when the spiritual community puts out 8-8, that doesn't mean that you just go ride the wave because everybody else is saying that it is, or, like, what's the reason why that you're doing it? Or like, where's the, it's not like 100 years ago they were talking about 8-8. It's not like 1,000 years ago they were talking about 8-8. They weren't. It wasn't like the astrologers that have passed astrology on through the millenniums have been saying that there's a Lion's Gate on 8-8. That's because there was no 8-8 in the same time system, because they were on a different calendar system. The Gregorian calendar system started in the late 1800s. There was countries still in the 1900s on the Julian calendar system. And they were like, nah, we're not ready to convert yet. It's like a new thing, this Gregorian calendar system. So the 8-8.
And then there's the Instagram calendar.
Exactly. There's the Instagram,
which is its own other zeitgeist now.
It is.
It's like, guys, that's not going to be here for very long.
No.
Like, you can't really base stuff off of that. Because once that's not there to show you what's next, right, then you're not going to know where you're going or what time it is, or like.
Yeah. Good luck finding your MySpace page. Like that, you have to use Wayback Machine to like see a glimpse of remembering your MySpace.
I got to try that.
Oh, it's there. Yeah.
My MySpace was lit. Like I was coding that stuff. I had mute,
And like that, but you're right. There's the Instagram calendar, right?
Yeah, another just disembodied like thought form matrix that people are fully like in, and like that's their world, that's their belief system, that's their timing, that's their endorphin like cycle, that's their new circadian rhythm, is like the algorithm's rhythm. Algol's rhythm is your new circadian rhythm. Which algol,
not a good place to be. It's like being drunk too.
It's like having a staring contest with Medusa. Doesn't end well.
No, and especially it's unfortunate because especially for the feminine out there, that's a place that we're seeing suicide rates in women go higher when they're younger because of Instagram, because of Facebook, because of Twitter, because of Snapchat, because of that social media, which really, in a weird way, it's kind of a byproduct of a spiritual awakening too. That's been helpful,
right?
But at the same time, it's also, that means the construct is going to have the opposite of the dark realm and its programming. Mm-hmm. So I think it's like even being very pure and clean with your Instagram of what you're following out there, right? And like what your intention is with it is important. And especially if you start doing the compare and contrast thing, that's again only, I think, supposed to be really with spirit and the embodiment of yourself. Like that's the compare and contrast, not that person has the life more that I want to be like.
Right.
And continuing to then, throw out chum, because then you're moving farther away from your true embodiment or code of yourself.
You're becoming a tangent of a tangent of a tangent of someone else's, probably not their truth anyway.
Which would be very unrooted because you'd be building another layer of everything that you're creating on there on top to where that's something that will fall eventually, because it can't hold it up because it doesn't have a root or foundation in the embodiment of itself.
Right.
You know, and that's why I've always enjoyed following the Instagram accounts of people that are the most real that they are, right? Like, I don't care what like people who don't care what people think about what they're doing on there. Or just even, you know, the most simple people who are just use it to put up a picture of their family or whatever.
Yeah.
I find more respect in that than throwing out, like, trying to be, you know, something that really in person you would not be.
Right. That you couldn't possibly.
That's the test, really, is like
the angles. Yeah.
I think the test of this social media culture and now is, are you the same person on there that you are in person? Like, is it like, wow, you're exactly like you are online? You know, that I'm going to get a little Leo. That's what I'm proud of, is that people go, you're exactly the same on your social media and on your YouTube and on your this than you are in person. I'm like, thanks. That I always take that as like, thanks. Because I'm not trying to be somebody else. I'm just trying to be myself. And I'm not afraid to say what I'm going to say. I'm not afraid to be what I'm encoded in. I'm not trying to create.
That's impressive for a 5/1 living in a projection field to actually.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, I get the other half too. That it's so much of that I am embodied in who I am, and that they do not like that. Mm-hmm. So I'm proud of that too, because that means at least I'm in my true space.
And that's in your galactic calendar, right? That's in your mind.
Yeah, yellow lunar warrior.
You're here to polarize.
Right. Mm-hmm. And that's what's kind of a hard thing is we all have our own unique roles, and I think that's where these tools help us to help understand. Like, people get upset with me because they're like, I wish you weren't so polarizing. And I'm like, that's literally from human design, from even astrology as a double Leo, and even in the dream spell calendar, that is what my code is. And the more that I stayed away from that younger, the more lost, confused, sad, not knowing who I really was because I was afraid to be polarizing. Mm-hmm. Or I was programmed to not be polarizing. When I broke those programs and I embodied it, I don't even recognize myself.
Yeah.
And when I went on reality TV, you know, and I was polarizing, that's what gave me life.
Yeah.
And even though, nobody liked me, it was what actually, out of all the people that were on the show and all that, I'm the only one who made something of it, even though I was the most hated on the show. I was, you know, and all it actually created articles about me where it didn't create articles about the ones that everybody loved.
Right.
So for me, that's being true in the embodiment. And I think that people have to be willing to look at, like, hey, I'm more cool with people who are whatever they might be, that might not be what other people want them to be, but they're successful with their life because they're happy in themselves and they're being who they are. That's to me the most respect, because I think that that's the hard part of the Aquarian energy we're in, which there's a lot of the emotional gates that are in that place of how you should be in society, or that could be a depressing place if you're not strong enough to really embody who you are, no matter what the, you know, crowd says at you, or if it boos at you, or if it isn't aligned with you. It's okay. Like, there's some people who are just going to be like, I don't agree with that. And it's like, okay.
I think that's a good sign when you find people that don't agree with you, like, just on a everyday level. I feel like that means you're actually rooted in something.
Right.
If you're able to polarize, it means there's something true about what you're holding. That's a good sign in my book.
Yeah, I feel like, oh man, in these times it's been, because the systems are breaking, the programming is not working, right? Like the programming's not working anymore on people. And the polarization is that there's a lot of people who have been awake, they've had their walk-in experiences, they've stepped into it, and they're going against the programming, right? Which is the deprogramming, is embodying outside of the program in your true authentic form and creation. But it's interesting to see the people still in the program that are fighting like hell to keep a program, and those are the ones that are the weirdest and craziest, because it's like their whole life dedication right now is, especially through using social media, to complain and to throw everything they've got, is to hold on to some sort of program. I just put up a story yesterday of a guy just being like, don't worry about all the names that are being called at you for being a certain way, because when it's coming from the television programming, or it's coming from, and that's what's crazy, is the television literally is the program, or the Black Mirror is the program now. It's through social media, it's through the television, it's through movies, it's through all this stuff, and that's projection field stuff. Mm-hmm. And they're projecting massive amount of programming, and the collective awakening is happening inside of ourselves and connecting with souls that are connecting to each other, that are breaking out of those systems. That's where the collective awakening is strong. It is a silent majority, mm-hmm. And it doesn't have to scream it on the top of the mountain.
That's not the story anymore.
No.
That's been done.
Yeah, and it didn't, it reminds me of like Moses and the tablets, right? With the 10 Commandments. Yeah, that story's done. Mm-hmm. There's no giant that's going to, godly figure that's going to be on a mountaintop with a huge tablet telling you these are the 10 ways that you must live.
And that was an entity that was trying to hijack a narrative anyway, too. Like, that whole thing was not.
I could tell you, if that ever happened today, or if I was there, and I probably was there, I probably was just like, sorry, bro, fucking, I don't know where you got that tablet, but, I think I'm okay. I think I already know some of these things internally. And if I ask my heart, yeah, I don't feel like killing somebody, so I'm already good on that, dude. You know what I mean? Like, if you ask your heart and you ask your true self, usually I would say 100% of the time the answer is always going to be correct. Mm-hmm. That when it comes from love and when it comes from a true knowing of your embodiment of yourself, when you look and you ask yourself, you're going to go, yeah, this is what it is. And maybe that's a little easier for manifesting generators that have really powerful sacral intelligence. But there's other people out there who have other parts of the intelligence and the different parts of human design that they need to, I think, understand better and start going from that place to understand to take that invite or not, or to respond or not. Or as a manifesting generator, that it's okay to respond and then pull out once it doesn't feel good anymore. That there's sometimes where...
Sometimes as an MG, you got to start doing it before you realize you don't want to do it.
Right.
Like, that's the big thing with us, is like, we kind of have to like get going to really feel. It's like, oh, there's no energy. Never mind.
Right.
And yet all of that societal pressure will make us be like, oh, well, I just got to keep going, follow through with it because everyone's expecting me to. It's like, no, those are those super powerful moments when you start something and you feel that it's not right, and then you actually stop instead of just forcing yourself to follow through with empty stuff. Those moments change your life. They do, also,
and that's how this show was created, was when I decided to stop Deep Love Tarot, mm-hmm. which you were the first person on that show with me. That's the irony of it all, is that people were really upset with me, and now this show's so loved, they've forgotten about it. But 4 weeks ago, before we started this show, I was still getting, wow, where's Deep Love Tarot? Just come back and do it. And now not one person has hit me up about Deep Love Tarot for 4 weeks.
I can't believe that was only 4 weeks ago.
Well, I ended it longer than that, but we started the show. This is our 4th episode, right? So this show's coming up on its month, but for the last month, there's been no, it's like, it's out of the consciousness now, right? Because people are absorbing the information from this show, and they're like, oh yeah. So it doesn't make them think about that one where I did not feel good doing it anymore. It didn't make me, I felt frustrated.
No satisfaction. Yeah.
No satisfaction. And people were very upset. And I was like, well, I'm not going to do it. I don't feel it anymore. And so I think that's kind of a way of like showing people in life, hey, if you're not feeling something anymore, even if people don't like that, you have to be courageous enough to step into what's true.
Even if your own mind doesn't like that.
Right.
Because that's what the main fight is
or
gonna be
ego,
about.
because my ego was based on that persona, and it being a show that really got very big for me, that to be the one that kind of was like, yeah, I do tarot a little different, and a little bit more badass and blah, blah, blah. Like that part of me, the heretic in me was very upset in my mind, thinking about I can't be the heretic anymore in tarot, right? When really I reformed that, and North Node Uranus moment have said, I can be the heretic with Dylan on this show. And
much more.
And
so.
much more so, and much more embedded in my truth that feels way more satisfying. And that show always used to have people, and you were the first person to do it with me. But, whether it was Craig or whether it was Brian or whether it was, I've had so many other people. Erica, I had a lot of people on that show. Jax, the Peace Dealer, a lot of people. And it's a show that I feel like right now doing stuff together with people to get insights. Like I couldn't imagine this show without having you on here.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be the same at all and wouldn't be as powerful.
It's that Aquarian energy. Like we need to be in the rave configuration of basically, I would say 3 or more at best. But yeah, at least 2. Because it's like we don't even know who we are when we're on our own.
No.
Right now. Like I could be super in purpose and super aligned sitting here with you and then leave and kind of just forget that any of this was like so powerful, because that's the world we're living in, and that's just like the way that the energy is moving. So it's like these bonds help us maintain our true frequency, and our true vision and our true inner guidance.
And I think they help us be more open, right? Like when you're really in a true bond with somebody, you're open to hearing the other person. Like every time you speak about human design or any of your downloads that you get, especially tonight, looking at what is that? The junk, the not left angle, not right. It's the
juxtaposition.
The juxtaposition blew my mind. Opened up so many new doors for me.
That's fate.
Because I looked at that and I literally went, what is that? I've never seen that before. I always see RAX or LAX, I've never seen a chart with J and X. I'm like, what in the heck is that? That must be rare already I already was able to know that self-projected projectors, because my ex-wife is one. I'm like, I already knew from that that's very rare. And then I looked at 4-1 too, and I'm like, that's super rare too.
Yeah.
I'm like, so that is, and then looking at that cross, I was like, what is that? And I'm like, thank God you're here to just be like, oh yeah, that's da-da-da-da-da. I'm like, pfft.
Yeah, if you're 4-1, you're a dealer of fate.
Wow.
You're a karma dealer.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So that's what this
and that's what this new moon really is.
It's the karma dealer.
And as an astrologer, I've been saying the build up to this new moon has been that because of the sun and the moon being in its home sign and this new moon trine Jupiter. And then the second the new moon happens here in ours, Jupiter just turns off right after the new moon. Just bye-bye. See you guys later. And it is a very interesting karmic moment for people. And this really is about like seizing what's true and also not responding or not taking the invitation to what's not true. Because it's the stories that we're going to go on right now that are going to be really intense.
If there's no authentic full body yes to something, there's nothing to do.
Right.
There's nothing to do right now unless it's just fully like whoosh,
but by saying no to things right now opens the doors for the true yes.
Because just like you had to end Deep Love Tarot, it's like we have to unplug from, you know, what our energy is manifesting in our world. We don't have unlimited capacity.
Right.
So if we're just putting all this energy into one thing, or these 5 things that we've been doing for 5 years or 10 years, and we're just craving for that new thing to happen next, it's like, well, you need to reallocate, you need to reinvest. And that means pulling out of some things. That means divesting from many things.
That's true. And that's I think where we can grow the most right now, is by actually being like, I don't feel it. That's okay. And we manifest faster when we finally have said no to something that doesn't feel good.
Right, because then we're not in dissonance with our own inner guidance. We're not fighting that true signal. And things that were a month ago, your best manifestation ever, that were just like, this is it, this is heaven. Now it might be like, I'm done, I'm out. Like, even though your mental self is like, but that's our heaven. Like, it took us years to manifest that. And it's like, no, we got to keep it moving. We got to keep closing the door behind us, because also that's how weird shit gets in and chases after us.
Especially in a time with crazy walk-in energy, right? Like, you don't, some of the stuff we want to walk out, and some of the stuff we really don't know if we want it to walk in. Especially when you said that, I first went to the CERN and what they're trying to have walk in. Mm-hmm. And that's where it's like, there's been some really weird stuff going on since CERN turned back on that has been really like really good stuff, like a lot of exposing of truth lately. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, also some really weird stuff, like Zelensky on the cover of Vogue, who's fighting a war supposedly, and has got all this money from all these countries, especially America, $54 billion, and he has enough time to get his wife out and do a Vogue photo shoot while people are dying.
I think that's just more making the illusion that much more clear. Like,
right, but it's the same thing as Fauci in 2020 taking a Vogue photo shoot with sunglasses by a pool in the middle of a pandemic. Mm-hmm. That's the Great Awakening. Is it's like a glitch in the matrix, right? That's a deja vu. They might be different people, but it's the same thing. Mm-hmm. And it's like, that's where the Great Awakening's happening, is like, oh, whatever's behind this whole thing is probably not going to be as true as they say, especially what's been revealed through Fauci over the years, or what's being revealed through Zelensky, and now he's doing the Vogue shoot. There was already enough people being like, I don't know about this Fauci character in 2020, when then he popped up on Vogue, and it was like, what? Like, you're telling us we can't go outside or do anything, but you're taking photo shoots? Was the cameraman like fucking 6 feet apart? Or, you start like what? And then now you see Zelensky, and his wife now pops up and sitting strong at the table as if they're fighting this great war.
Here's something to consider, and just look closely, everyone. But Zelensky is trans. Look closer, you'll see it.
Dang.
And that opens this whole other wormhole of how anybody that's going to get into that position within like the power structures has to go to that level of self-modification, to put it lightly, to qualify for being, a pawn for those kind of things. Like almost everyone in those organizations has to go through some kind of symbolic inversion in order to prove their allegiance to the greater initiative.
So I have another one about that. All the prime ministers and leaders that have all resigned in the last month, which has been a lot. Prime Minister Boris Johnson to, there's been a lot, right? There's been a lot of stepping down. They all shook hands with Zelensky within the last 2 months. So it's like the handshake that takes you down.
The Medusa handshake.
Yeah. And especially if you look at his chart, he's like Sun Venus conjunct in Aquarius. And so it's kind of an interesting, the Sun Venus conjunction, of course, has karma around burning relationships in life, you know? And so there is that weird part where, especially with Jupiter Saturn, that meant, right, to start the whole new cycle of hundreds of years of Jupiter Saturn air 20-year cycles, right? And also that happened at 0 Aquarius, where Pluto's about to enter. I mean, like, there's something to say about that figure of him being some weird catalyst point of an unpredictable, like, of course, I wasn't predicting that, right? Like, geez, right? Like that's the stuff you pay attention to in life. Somebody's trying to call the call-in number right now. Sorry, we're not doing calls.
Maybe it's Zelensky.
But that's what's crazy though, right? Is like there's something about that there's a catalyst with him and the avatar that he is. That's gonna shatter.
Especially like Ukraine being this hotbed of like some of the most early examples of human cloning and genetic.
Yes, and genetic and all the laboratories, which that's a true story. You know, the media tried to say it wasn't true, and then oh no, it's true, but it's not as bad as you think it, right? And then it was funded by America, or it was old labs that were from the USSR too. And it's like there is a lot of that, and also when you bring up genetic coding, but also coding of the internet codes. Some of the top coders in the world are in Ukraine and Russia, right? And in Russia, most of the coders left. They were like, we're not staying here right now. And so like, there's a lot that people aren't paying attention to. Like that's a hotbed area that there's been so much, whether it was in history or whether it's in the moment, that we all are going to look at. And I'm sorry to say they didn't put that on the freaking circle world map.
Our map to our future.
Right? I think that's the great awakening right now, is seeing. I love the Matrix movie so much because it actually was a great movie of helping people to understand the program. But the deja vu is the most important thing that they show in that, to know you're stuck in a weird loop. And that's also when the agents are coming, right? Is always the moment when he sees the black cat twice. And they're like, oh, that's a deja vu. That means they're here, right? So when I see, Vogue, big person that's been brought up in the media for months as a savior, right? The whole savior complex thing that's ending now. And human design has shown us that too. Even Ra said the savior complex is going to die. And that's what we're going to see. Everything about Ukraine, just the same way as we saw everything about the shot and Fauci being all false.
Any narrative that has the word save in it,
right,
is crap. Just look
that's
for
true.
It. Yeah.
And that's where the whole Ukraine thing is going to fall, just like the Fauci gene like therapeutics that didn't work and don't work. It's going to be the same. That's a moment, but that also means that there's an energy behind it, just like in the Matrix, that are the agents of the program that are behind it.
And the agents were, multiple beings in those movies, but they were all one being.
They were all one.
That's another thing to really look out for and really understand, like these like dark cabals. They're in many different human forms. These bodies that have been produced over generations to be easily inhabitable and just be jumped into as like an empty vessel, they're all one being,
right,
orchestrating themselves. It's probably like only a very small number of main actual beings that are just fighting each other for dominance through different people, which sounds kind of abstract, but it's totally real.
And it's a Capricorn who is Fauci and an Aquarius who is Zelensky, and that's where Saturn has been through both their vogue moments, and both ruling the Saturnian energy, and both having that same weird quality of being savior energies, and the entity that's behind that energy is, like you say, all the agents in the Matrix all turned out to be the same agent, which he tried to infect every single person in the Matrix, including the Oracle, right? And he had taken over everybody, and it was Neo who had to come, but he even infected Neo too, and that was the way that supposedly, made the whole computer say, we're gonna do a reset, we're gonna call truce. But that really didn't happen in number 4, which was so crazy. That everything with the shot is a lot like the same way that Agent Smith puts his hand inside of you and takes you over. But, that's not a popular opinion, but I'll say it.
Checks out.
I mean, you know what I mean? Like, that's kind of the creepiest part about it all, is like anybody putting their hand in the Ukraine thing literally is stepping down.
Because they're not them. But
it's also like, what's the energy of the entity behind Ukraine trying to set up the countries that whoever's shaking hands with them is falling down? What are they trying to install in those countries next? And that's what's scary, looking at America and looking at Biden and what's going on, or how Biden, when he was in Saudi Arabia, didn't do a handshake. He did a hand bump that everybody's all pissed about. It's kind of a weird thing.
Because, they've already, kind of cemented their own timeline over there.
Yes. Actually, today it just came out that Russia, China, and a bunch of other countries want to join, are creating their own currency now that it's going to be backed by minerals and actual, like, tangible things. And a bunch of countries are like, okay, we'll join you. And they're all ones that are not on our little Western, like, list.
Yeah.
And when you see what's going on right now, that's kind of an interesting ploy right now, right? It's like, here's Zelensky taking a picture on Vogue with his wife in this, like, nice castle-ish, lifestyle, while he's in supposedly the most dangerous war, and people are dying every day in the thousands, but we don't see any of it. Well, at the same time, all these other countries are coming together and actually have backing of what they have, and then go create their own system. And it's like, we're told they're all the bad guys, but it's like, what's really going on? And it's kind of interesting, because the euro is so down, and Russia today just announced, we're cutting the pipeline now. Already it was cut down to 40%. Now we're cutting it down another 20%. So Germany and the EU isn't getting any more natural gas. It's like at the lowest amount. And if they cut the rest off, they just made the EU just came together and said, okay, we're going to naturally cut down our natural gas, because that's what fuels their electricity there and everything. And they're like, we're going to cut it down 15%, but if Russia cuts the rest of it down, then there's going to be no power. And the big question is Germany going to backdoor deal with Russia and start breaking apart NATO? Because now this whole unified front against Russia for Ukraine, it's not going to be unified, and the EU is going to break apart. I've called it since 2016 based off it's a Scorpio. It has a bunch of hard Scorpio placements. And in 2016, I said the beginning of Brexit is the end of the EU. And right now it's happening. So the idea of the breaking apart now of energies, especially unified fronts that are from a false front, are going to break apart, because you can't live a false lie and be like, oh yeah, we're for this, but we're going to cut off everything from Russia. And then, but when they cut off our shit, we can't live, and our people can't live, period. When they try to do that to Russia, it's kind of a weird matrix thing playing out in front of people's eyes. And it's like a lesson, I think, for people to understand how to, navigate within yourself, and also at the same time, but, before you start acting crazy on other people, what are you receiving from that person? Or, it's okay to walk away, but you don't also have to impose sanctions on another person. Like, right. That whole idea of sanctioning, right? And when there's too many lies and we don't know the truth of what really is going on in Ukraine, you're not showing it to people, people are going to be upset. And I think part of this collective awakening is going to be when the lights turn off in Europe, which is already what they're telling him. And that's scary and sad. But Vogue doesn't care. But is Vogue or is Vogue? And the idea of Vogue is very dark anyway.
I actually looked up like Vogue etymology. So I'm like, what does that even mean? Apparently it's rooted in some French word that means like to go well.
Jeez.
You know, going according to plan, basically.
Well, I mean, even Madonna and Vogue, right? And the whole idea of like Vogue being kind of a really beautiful kind of thing, right? Like Vogue is supposed to be kind of like this really fashionable / fashion.
General acceptance or favor.
Oh, look at that. General acceptance or favor. Just accept generally population what's going on here. Mm-hmm. If it's on Vogue, you must generally make that acceptable.
Yeah.
Wow.
Space Force. Space Force is coming. Wait, but is it actually the human design bodycraft?
That's crazy that I was just like, I looked at that and I went, wait, what? And remember I was talking about like the center of the earth, like stuff. And that would be like the root at the very bottom and the sacral. And then there's the monopole in the middle. Mm-hmm. That's half and half. See that? Like that half circle right there. And then in between that's kind of crazy.
That is crazy.
Weird. What is that in the middle?
People. I think
they're in the middle of the monopole.
They are. There's Uranus and Mars.
That's crazy.
And it's all about like that direction. It's like, let's go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
Yeah, there's 11 little dots, right? But really one is half. It's 10 and a half.
And remember from our first week, 11 and a half is the dimensional field from which like all this dark magic is operating from.
Right.
So there would be 11 spheres.
Well, the whole thing is a sphere. That would be the 11. Mm-hmm. So it's 11 and a half.
Right. See? There you know.
That's how you know. There it is.
You just got to count.
You want to take the time. Yeah. I mean, we went through this whole show and we're like, yeah, I don't know. But now, and it was interesting and naturally divine that you had that placed over a body graph. And then literally looking at it like a body graph is extreme in how much the emphasis on that monopole with Mars and Uranus. And look at, there's two people sitting there. And look at the one person in the sacral right there. Like, that's funny. Or root. That's funny. But yeah, like that's pretty crazy actually, in a good way. Like to be able to break through the real like false codes and see through the codes.
It's all about numbers and colors. I swear. That is how you can see the truth any given time. Know the number codes, know the color codes. And nothing can lie to you because everything is labeled in reality. Right. Everything is giving itself away at all times. All you got to do is know the codes. and it's all very clear.
Well, and I think if you think of crop circles, right? Like I think that especially now that there's been this whole like, you know, UFO disclosure on the public front and all that, this is the first crop circle to kind of pop up since that. And it's kind of interesting that more people are going to accept it more than ever without realizing, looking at the shapes. I mean, if you look at other shapes of crop circles, they're a little bit more, I would say, eccentric, I guess you could say, or a little bit more like different. But this one feels very organized in a way, right? And kind of messing with people's, I mean, actually, this is crazy because they took down Robert E. Lee's statue, I don't remember, at the beginning of this year, and they found a time capsule underneath it. And in the time capsule, over 90% of what was in the time capsule was Freemason books and Freemason money and Freemason this and Freemason that, and then a little bit of old Continental or Confederate money. But it was all Mason stuff in the time capsule.
Yeah, the only timeless culture is
right. So it's like
the builder's culture.
Right. And like that's the first thing that I saw. And a lot of people in the chat saw that too. But
let's see where we're at now.
And of course, that's the Rosicrucian rose that the Masons jacked of the Rosicrucians before Freemasonry. And again, but they're using organic.
Yeah. Geometries.
Correct. And showing you that the square box is not what to go on, which I don't think people can see.
To be transcended.
And that's the rose that feeds the rose that creates the honey, which really it's the rose, the soul that's open, that attracts the bee to pollinize it, that the universe comes to you when you're in your natural state.
When you're waiting to respond or you're waiting for an invitation.
Mm-hmm. That people get it wrong, like they chase after the bee. Right. Instead of letting the bee come to pollinize. Right. And being open to the bee to come and pollinize you to create honey. Like there's a lot, it's that's from the 1400s and people don't even get it. That's why I have it up.
Our guest star.
Yeah. Well, I think this was a great show tonight and definitely has me like feeling, I think, just more confident and knowing whatever's going on, taking the time with it. And I think it's good to also have others to talk about it with right now. Yeah. Like that's why I just didn't buy the whole circle world thing right away. I was like, hey, what do you think, Dylan? And then our reactions were the same. I'm like, okay.
Sacral was just like,
yeah. And I think it's important for people out there right now, especially during this time, to find your best friend. It could be whoever in your life.
Your allies,
and discuss things. And when you have issues going on, whether it's family, whether it's work, whether it's important to communicate these things out, to find solutions and realize maybe the solution is much more of just getting it out and realizing through bringing it out and having other people with you to assess it, to talk about it, to be supportive with you, to feel so much better and to find what the answer is inside to respond to it with, opposed to freaking out right now over things.
Because maybe you don't need to do anything. Maybe you just need to talk it out, And in that, you can respect the waiting period more because you're like, okay, I just needed to kind of process it. And I'm telling you, waiting is the magic. Like, waiting is the thing that if you keep in waiting, the whole Wizard of Oz facade will come crashing down.
Right.
You won't even have to do anything.
Well, yeah, it's like Emerald City, right? Like how Dorothy's running the whole time down the yellow brick road. And the second that she gets to the field, they all pass out from the poppy fields, if you remember. They're running so fast. And then they finally get there, and it's not what they think it is, right? And it's this glistening, beautiful, like green Emerald City. And it's like everybody's running to these things without patiently just strolling. When she was kind of just strolling because she was nervous is when she actually found her allies. Mm-hmm. But the second she found them, then she just had to rush, and they had to rush to find a heart. They had to rush to find all these things that they were lacking in their life. And it wasn't until they faced the illusion that they found it.
Boom.
Boom. And I think facing the illusion is the most important thing in life, and to not be in denial of the illusion either. It's like if you're in denial of the illusion,
that's really
right, because all of them had that the whole time that they were missing. Mm-hmm. and and even her, right? Like, all I want to do is go back home, and all she did is wake up. Like, it was like, it was a dream. But it was weird because she met, right before that happened, is she went and met a tarot reader in that weird box car, who is the wizard.
I don't remember that part.
Yeah, a lot of people don't. At the beginning of the movie, she ends up running into it. It says astrology readings and tarot readings. She runs into this like train car that's the actual Wizard of Oz, but he's like a normal guy, and he reads her cards and reads her astrology and goes, oh yeah, something extreme's about to happen to you. Very Mars Uranus North Node is such the Wizard of Oz, right? The whole idea of the tornado coming and taking the house and flying her all the way to, this crazy place where the house lands on the Wicked Witch, right? One of the Wicked Witches. And I forgot which one. I think it's the Wicked Witch of the East that she kills, and it's the Wicked Witch of the West that's now mad.
Right.
But those are interesting things to pay attention to, and that's the first movie that was ever brought out in color. Right? So like, it's like one of those, that whole concept of that movie. It's so important for people to realize, and the idea of like how I'm not in Kansas anymore, right? Too, right? This whole idea of like, I'm not where I really thought I was. I'm somewhere else different, when really it's her clicking of her shoes, which she thought the magic slippers were the way out, where it's like, no, you just need to embody in who you are already. And that's what the whole story of all the others are, the Tin Man and the Scarecrow and the Lion, right? They just had to learn to embody who they were the whole time. They didn't need to run to the glistening things that are going to solve the problem. Like, it's the Seven of Cups in tarot. It's a black body, right, with no soul, looking at all these things in the clouds, these prizes, because it's empty. It doesn't. So the idea that you don't have something
is the illusion.
They're
banking on you believing.
Yeah, right? Like, oh, I don't have love, or I don't have money, or I don't have a job, or I don't have any of these things. Tarot teaches us so much in the story. If you follow the cards in the story, the Seven of Cups is empty, and it's the illusion. And then the Eight of Cups comes after that, where it's like, fuck, I'm done walking away. I'm walking away from my emptiness, and I'm going to go into the new moon, which is I'm going to just walk towards that Nine of Cups, where actually it was all within me. I'm surrounded by 9 cups. I'm happy. And then that's when the 10 of Cups comes, where it's, now it all is really real, because you finally embedded in your true emotional self. But that 7 of Cups, that 8 of Cups to the 9 of Cups is that moment of you having to face the illusion that you need something to fulfill you. When you finally walk away from that is when you get to the 9 of Cups and the 10 of Cups, when it's like, but you have to individually be okay to then find the partnerships in life to build the beautiful rainbow of happiness. It's crazy that people follow tarot all the time and they don't even see that. They don't even see in the cards. That's how the story plays. There's stories in all of them. The 10 of Wands, after the 9 of Wands, after the 8 of Wands, like, and after the victory and the 6 of Wands comes, like, where, okay, you got victory, now you got to be on the position. Then the 8 of Wands comes and the arrows fly, and now when things come at you, you're a little bit more timid and you have some walls up. And then, oh my gosh, that 10 of Wands comes and it's like, oh, I will hold as much weight as I can. And then finally it's like, nope, I'm going to leap out the Knight of Wands and finally jump towards things that makes me happy instead of taking on things that don't make me happy anymore, because that's the only thing I thought was victorious in life or something.
Whoa. This is such a golden opportunity.
It is. And the swords, I think, bring the craziest part of the story, just because you follow the sword story, and that one is met with so much of the 7 of Swords being that whole misunderstanding to, us lying to ourselves. And then it's the trap in the mind, the 8 of Swords, right? And then the wake up of the 9 of Swords of like, I have been stuck in my fucking head. Mm-hmm. And then the 10 of Swords, like, I am done being in my patterns and loops. I'm not going to keep putting another fork and stuck into it. And then that Knight of Swords is responding in the moment of a firing, burning building that it's not thinking. You don't think like, should I go save that building and the person in it in the fire? You don't think about that. You just go and do it. That's why the Knight of Swords is so fast and doesn't think, right? And then the Queen of Swords, she sees above the clouds for the first time. She's still in the clouds, but she's in the blue sky and she's able to finally see clear. And then the King of Swords is looking direct. She knows exactly what things are now. And it's not so much in the mind, it's just clear in the mind to know I can deal with anything in my head and get out of those crazy toxic places with it and just be direct with using my mind in the direction I'm going and just having it be there to analyze or to communicate in the moment and being very strong on that. So the swords to me are, the whole tarot is an amazing story that if people were to actually use it as the way it's supposed to be, and the way that it's a storyline. It's literally a storyline. The whole cards, or even all the major arcana, or a huge storyline. After the Tower comes the Star. It's super simple. It's like very easy to look at. After the Fool comes, the Magician, and then it goes to the High Priestess. Before.
The gates of the I Ching are the same thing. They're a continuous story. And if you follow each one through the 6 lines, it directly leads you into the essence of the next gate.
That's true.
And I think that's another really fascinating way to relate to this is even Ra said, like for him, it was all about the magic of these hexagrams and what they communicate when you can really speak their language.
Right.
And that's a whole other story, perhaps something to learn in DNA Alignment Academy starting on August 13th. Study with me.
Well, yeah, because especially... Right? Like some of those I Ching stories are, especially they come from China, right? And the original ones, and they're so deep and poetic.
Yeah.
And life is so much more poetic than people think, but they help you so much. And I know that Gene Keys is kind of like an advanced or like a hybrid new version of the I Ching, right? Like kind of takes it and brings it to more forms of, I think, current understandings, but...
Yeah, the Gene Keys was made by a 4/6 profile being, so it likes to speak from the heart, but it also wants to pull us towards something different and synthesize things that have already been into something new.
But I think that's what's great for people to go through your academy is to learn this stuff, especially in how to read their own chart and see how much power there is to understand within their own DNA code of their soul.
Yeah, exactly.
And how they can connect to spirit better, which is so important. It's the most important thing. And I think for being in 2022 and beyond, no human design is like detrimental, I feel. It's detrimental in your life if you are not incorporating the human design.
Yeah.
It is the design for this future and how to get through this future. It literally...
It's for the Aquarian age.
It literally is the code that you must know how to understand. It has changed my life and saved my life and made my life operate so much clearer, even being an astrologer, because it is astrology. Like that's my favorite part. The astrology is that core basis that it all pops up from. And it's made my astrology better. And it's made my life so much more, especially, gosh, it was like when we did I put up on my YouTube, I don't know if you saw, like I read our episode where we first talked about human design in 2019. Yeah. I put that up on my YouTube like story because it was after our first episode of our new show Now. And I was like listening to it and I'm like, man, like, it's so important. And I look at my life 3 years later and how much I've learned from you and how much I can be able to talk to you about it. And it's just like, even the stuff I was asking then to now is so different. And the understanding of it, I've learned so much from you and I've learned so much and it's helped my life so much. It's been something that truly makes me know in every moment, like, is this true or not for myself? Mm-hmm. How am I going to navigate this next moment in my life? How am I going to understand the story? And maybe it's not so much about having too much of an understanding, except of how am I going to respond? What's my inner authority? What's my strategy? And if I follow those things, I'm golden every time.
Every time, everything else
I'm
works
golden, no
itself
matter
out.
how crazy the astrology transit is. I'm golden. So that's why I think for people to take your school, that's something that I can't teach. Like, that's the beautiful part of this collective right now. Like, you know, and especially you've been doing it for so long, and that you incorporate so many parts of it that I don't see anybody else incorporating.
Next in line.
Sorry to pump you up, but you know, it's true. And again,
you've gotten really good. Like, you've gotten really good. It's impressive.
well, yeah, I don't know, but that was all in the moment, though. That was all like, oh, so that you got those gates there. Okay, see, that means I won't probably have it in my head. I was just like, oh, no. But that's been just because it, like anything, you show up to it every day.
Mm-hmm.
And I will never say I'm a human design reader, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's just not my. I'm an astrologer. That's where I've spent my decades plus. But it's just so great to have an understanding of it, at least, because it's changed my life so much. And that's where I feel like if people can really take the time to go through that 12 weeks with you, they are going to live their life in bliss, because it reminds me of servicing a car, right, all the time, and knowing how to not have it break.
Yeah, exactly. It's the owner's manual.
It's for
you.
And it's something especially that can make your astrology better, and see that there's more than just deacons, or there's just more than placements of degrees, that there's so much more beyond those realms of the spherical realms. And that's what Dante talks about to get to Paradiso, to get out of purgatory, you have to go through all these spherical understandings of the planets, and then the bridge of contemplation, which I think the bridge of contemplation is human design, understanding your code to get to the spirit realm. Like, there's this, especially in these Aquarian times, in the new age of Aquarius, it would mean that a new system would have to be, but embedding all systems. And that's what it does. Yeah. So it's like, that makes sense to me. It's like, that makes sense. And human design is something that triggers people at the beginning, because it's like so foreign at the beginning. But the more you go into it, it's like you don't even think of it as foreign, you think of it as home. It's home. It's home to yourself. It's an integration into the systems that needed to come together. They had to, because it's not about, the I Ching, and that's what the Chinese use, you know. And more Western astrologers use tropical astrology over here, because even in human design, you could throw it into Vedic too system.
According to some people.
I know, but I'm just saying that, but there is that whole, like, like, it's not just these systems that only are used over there by those cultures and those people. Right. And over here,
it's beyond the duality.
It's beyond that. It's the integration of how Uranus works. And so that's why, and I know this might upset astrologers, but that's why I still think Mercury is the ruler of astrology, and I think Uranus is the ruler of human design.
What
so
else
modern astrology says that Uranus is the ruler of astrology now. And originally it was Hermetic and Mercurial. And I feel that it's still, astrology is Mercurial, and that human design is the Uranian system.
I mean,
it's like it's not even a question to me, because you can find answers from both. But if you want to go quantum, which is what Uranus is, taking the Mercurial understandings of astrology and quantifying that through all these quantum systems that human design brings together, you are rocket shipping into infinite understandings that blow your understandings out the window that you thought, and take you into a design of understanding yourself that you are, I don't want to say unstoppable, because I don't believe in that, but I believe much more in like a feeling of confidence that you can understand how to navigate, and you can be a better self, and you can really start aligning with the manifestation of your true path. That really is the most satisfying feeling in the world.
Well said.
Thank you. Yeah, Well, I just think it's important whenever I hear anybody putting something out there, like, it's like your human design school is going to be different than you're going to see anywhere else. So it's like...
That's why it's called DNA Alignment Academy, not human design school.
Right.
It's actually an energy container as well.
That's true.
And it will align your DNA.
Boom. Which I think is very important, especially in these times.
Mm-hmm. Designed for these times.
Yep. And Friday I'll be with Coyote Star Astrology, and we're doing our Hell to Heaven big talk. So it's going to be awesome. Go to highvibe.tv and click on Hell to Heaven. And that'll be Friday at 7 p.m. Pacific. We'll be doing it here, and we'll be live streaming it on the High Vibe apps and the High Vibe website. So looking forward to that, and looking forward to next week for our show next week.
Hells yeah.
Right on. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks, guys. See you.